Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Piece Chapter 1011 with Luffy dressed up as Aladdin in the cover of Weekly Shonen Jump. I like how, despite him being dressed up as Aladdin, he still has Brook as his genie, and Brook looks like a Jolly Roger, so it's a very piratey version of Aladdin. I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind Nami being the giant one in the color spread is, but it's a very feel good spread. Very lively. Robin looks the best out of all of them, no contest. And it's good to see Jimbei in another one of these spreads as well, so it's all good. We start off with Kid and Killer witnessing the creation of Big Mom's new homie, and I have a question. So, last chapter, Kid made a comment about how strange the clouds were. So, is Big Mom's new homie the answer to why the clouds were behaving the way they were? Or is there still another answer to that question that Kid posed in the previous chapter? Big Mom calls her newly created homie Hera, which continues the Greek mythology theme of her homies, or at least the elemental homies that she uses. According to Greek mythology, Hera is actually Zeus's wife, and not only was she Zeus's wife, but Hera was also Zeus's sister. So you can connect the dots there. Now, because Kid takes that tremendous lightning attack, his ability over the metal box that is holding Zeus weakens, freeing Zeus, and so Law thinks that it would be a good idea to shift or teleport himself, Zoro, and Zeus downstairs. It was the most predictable play given that Law is still conscious, he's a doctor, so he can heal Zoro up. Now, initially I was also going to say that this was necessary because Law needs to get Zeus down to Nami, and we do see Zeus by the end of the chapter in the second floor, which is where Nami is. Like, he has a little panel and he shows up. So since we see Zeus by the end of the chapter, does that mean that Law and Zoro are nearby as well? Or does it mean that Zeus escaped Law while Law was busy healing Zoro? Another thing here is that I think a lot of us are under the assumption that Nami is going to be using Zeus to defeat Ulti because she did say that she needed stronger lightning to take her out. But because of this chapter, now I'm not so sure, because she could be using Zeus to take out Ulti, or she could actually use Hera to take her out as well. And so maybe that's why Oda didn't show us Hera's full design in this chapter. Maybe he's saving it for when Nami gets her name on the title of the chapter. It'll be Cat Burglar or something like that. And so what does a cat burglar do? Well, they steal. So maybe Nami will steal Hera and use Hera to finish off Ulti in that chapter. Or maybe she steals back Zeus and uses him. Because the way Big Mom and Prometheus were talking about Zeus, it made it seem as if they didn't care about him anymore. But yeah, whenever she gets her chapter, Nami has to steal something. And it's going to be either Zeus or Hera. And just FYI, Fulgora is the name for the Roman personification slash goddess of lightning. Yeah. After that, Luffy is left by himself to 1v1 Kaido, and I kind of get the impression that just like in the Katakuri fight, Kaido's level of respect towards Luffy is gradually beginning to increase. I mean, they're both smiling at each other, and they seem to be having fun to some degree, which we knew that Kaido had been urging for a real fight. I really want to know what you guys think in terms of what you think them having fun does for the stakes and the tension of the arc. I don't think Kaido is even close to getting defeated, but I do think that something needs to happen to kick the tension up a notch. I really like that panel of Superman Luffy charging at Kaido. And then in the next page, in that middle panel, you can see how Kaido's club is sort of beginning to bend from the pressure, which is another visual reference to Roger versus Whitebeard. This is gonna look amazing in the anime. Just that whole scene with Kaido and Luffy kind of gives me Naruto vibes to some extent, because there's a lot of silence in between them. Kaido says, "Worororo, I can tell you're enjoying yourself. The more uncertain the situation, the bigger your smile gets." And then Luffy doesn't say anything to him in response. He's just like staring at him going, and so it kind of brings me back to Naruto, because obviously there's that whole scene in the Valley of the End where Sasuke tells Naruto, "Naruto, did you know top tier ninjas are capable of reading each other's hearts just by exchanging blows without having to say anything?" So it seems like that's the direction that this is going into, where the two of them are communicating mainly by their attacks instead of by words. Because again, like, Luffy doesn't say much of anything, which would really make a lot of sense, because again, one of the things that Rayleigh tells Luffy is that Conqueror's Haki is the owner's own spirit, or the spirit of the owner itself. So it's kind of like Kaido's spirit and Luffy's spirit
each time they exchange blows, it's actually connecting. So you're transmitting information about your spirit with each attack. And I also think it ties it in very neatly to what happens at the end of the chapter with Big Mom using Advanced Conqueror's Haki on page 1 as well. Because what happens there, according to what Big Mom says, is the thing that she learns violates her own pirate code. So according to what she says, the violation goes against her own essence. And so that's why she decides to use Conqueror's Haki in that final attack, because that's her spirit.
Apparently, Big Mom's attack opened up a tunnel between the second and third floor, and so that's where Kid and Killer are. And I just have to give props to both of them for taking that attack. We don't know what they did defensively to be able to take that attack, but they fell off the horse and they get right back up. And I think what this chapter is mainly doing is that it's setting up a 1v1 for Kid. Just like we have Luffy at the top fighting Kaido 1v1, Oda needs to keep the Kid and Luffy rivalry alive, so Kid is going to face Big Mom now. So they run into Hawkins, and the betrayal gets brought up, and Kid is mad at him, but he's not as mad as he was with Apu, because with Apu he just squashed him, because Apu betrayed them from the start, whereas Hawkins just kind of read the room and said, yeah, this isn't going to work out. And so Killer tells his Sencha to go on and find Big Mom and leave Hawkins to him, and then Hawkins begins transforming into his demon conquering form. And this is a form that we've seen only once before in the story. We saw it in Sabaody when he activated against Kizaru, which was pretty useless against an admiral. But I think the reason for why he's activating it against Killer is that the way Hawkins uses this form is that he uses the claws, the nails on his hands, to slash things. So it's going to be Killer Scythes versus Hawkins' nails. And the whole thing just kind of gives me Inu versus Jack vibes. Just like Inuarashi, Killer is at a disadvantage. We hear it from Hawkins' prediction. The odds are against him, 92%. Killer has already taken significant damage from his fight with the two Yonko. Plus, because Hawkins has the ability to transfer the damage that he receives onto his straw-made voodoo dolls, in order for Killer to be able to defeat Hawkins, he would first need to be able to kill Hawkins 10 times. And on top of that, Hawkins still has these booster cards in his deck, and so if he happens to draw one of these cards, he'll essentially be getting a power-up. Also, Hawkins kind of needs a win right now because we saw him take an L against Law, like he was all cut up in the prison. So if he loses against Killer here, it's going to make him look worse. But also, despite Killer being at a disadvantage here, because one of the biggest themes of this story is freedom, and proving people wrong about their ways, the resolution to Hawkins' character has to be about him stepping away from that probability, leaving the cards behind to some degree, and just learning to take a chance, no matter what the cards say. It's about learning to live with risk. And Killer kind of alludes to it when he's like, wow, you're still depending on fortunes? It kind of reminds me of that scene with Capone in Whole Cake Island where he's talking about Katakuri's ability to see the future, and he says, even though we can't see into the future, all of us have the right to change it.
I'm also pretty glad that in the official translation, once Kid runs off, Hawkins actually admits to Killer, whew, that was close. That was a good thing that he left because, and this is what the official translation says, I could not have beaten both of you.
We see that page 1 has fully gone into his hybrid form chasing Nami and Usopp, and Oda kind of uses Usopp in this chapter to confirm two things, which we kind of already knew, but he really lays it out for the reader in this chapter via Usopp. The first thing is that there's something special about prehistoric Zoans that sets them above regular Zoans because of their durability. And then page 1 kind of says, well, you're durable as well. I mean, think about it. Ulti literally bashed their skulls in, and they're still fighting. And then the other thing that Oda confirms in this chapter is that you can't use Tama's Kibidango on real Zoan Devil Fruit users. That only works on animals and Smile users, which we've suspected for the longest time, but now at least it's officially confirmed via Usopp. There's a lot of cartoon comedy in that scene with Nami and Usopp attacking page 1's weak spots. Like, I can literally hear the sound effects for that panel being something like... Usopp then uses some exploding flowers to make page 1 let go of Kumachiyo, and then once he makes sure that page 1 is on the floor and there's enough distance between them, Usopp can now safely shoot out some pinecone bombs. Ever since my Pokemon days, I've always been very curious about what it is with pine cones exploding. So it turns out that there are these pine cones called serotinous pine cones, and basically what that means is that since the pine trees keep their seeds inside of the pine cones, whenever it gets really hot, whenever the heat gets excessive, It's like the trees have this defense mechanism, and so the pine cones kind of pop open so that they can release their seeds. And so that's why sometimes some of these pine cones, you can hear them popping in the wilderness. It also happens when there's a wildfire in the woods. The fire triggers them to pop open so that they can release their seeds. Kind of like an emergency way for them to reproduce in the face of death.
So there are a lot of explosions here with Usopp's ammo. And I remember back in the day, I think a lot of people in general don't really see Usopp getting armament haki. So what people would say would be like, well, maybe he can use sea stone bullets or he can get some type of sea stone ammo, which could still happen because we know that sea stone originated in Wano. And so maybe Usopp can actually stock up on some sea stone weapons or something for his arsenal. But like in addition to that, one of the biggest possibilities for Usopp in the future, and I think most of us agree, is that he is a very strong candidate to get King's Haki. So I can just imagine like Usopp in the future being able to infuse his ammo, like his weapons, with King's Haki. I mean, just him being able to put Conqueror's Haki into his ammunition, into his projectiles, and shooting that stuff into his opponent's face, and then it just blowing up with Haki in their faces. I think that would be such an awesome thing for Usopp to be able to do. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, because I don't anticipate him being able to do that up until Elbaf at the earliest. But I do think that just like we talked about how Nami said that she needed stronger lightning and how that kind of foreshadows her cat burglar chapter, right? I think that Usopp saying in this chapter, my weapons are more long range. They're more suited for long range fights. I think that pretty obviously foreshadows him getting his Sniper King chapter. I also really like that after Tama talks about what her plan is, getting to the main stage and then giving the orders to the people that have eaten her Kibidango so that they can help take down the other forces, she actually admits that she's scared. And in doing so, that kind of like makes Usopp stand up and say like, don't worry, Tama, like I got this. So I like how Usopp showcased a bit of his bravery in that scene. And then Nami also has like this maternal protective side of her that we saw back in Punk Hazard, like when it comes to children, right? Like when it comes to children, she becomes really, really protective. And we see a little bit of that in this scene as well. I don't know why, but in the official English translation, Nami says to Tama, me and this old guy here are going to protect you. So I'm assuming that's a reference to like Usopp dressing up as an old man, because that was essentially his disguise during the beginning part of Wano. So page 1 isn't really down, and he keeps pursuing them. And then they run into Big Mom, who is actually looking for Kid, actually calling out Kito. She recognizes both Usopp and Nami from Whole Cake Island, and I'm assuming she recognizes Usopp from her run-in with him and Chopper in the Brachio tank.
Now, the whole thing about Big Mom acting differently towards children that are 10 years or younger was kind of foreshadowed in chapter 845, where we see her interact with her youngest children. Ana wants some knives, and Big Mom is just like, give her some knives and try to get along, children. And so there could be two reasons for why she's motherly in this case. The first one is that she's actually trying to mimic Mother Caramel's behavior towards her, because the Mother Caramel that Big Mom remembers, or at least the version of Mother Caramel that Big Mom knew, was always very nice to her when she was young. So it could be that she's trying to replicate that behavior with the kids, but then also another reason could be that she's actually subconsciously trying to atone for eating her friends that were around that age. So maybe deep down there's a part of her that feels very guilty about eating her friends, and I don't know if she's processed that guilt or not, but maybe that's why she feels like she has to be nice to children. Or maybe just the fact that Big Mom ate Mother Caramel and she was a devil fruit user, maybe she just got that part of her personality automatically. I also kind of want to know how Big Mom would react to Momonosuke in this scenario as well, because Momonosuke, Tama, and Chopper were there in Okobota Town with her as well, and we know how she reacted to Chopper. Like, Big Mom started chasing Chopper and Usopp when they were in the Brachio tank. So it doesn't really work for Chopper, but that's because Chopper is 17 years old. But Momonosuke is 8, so I wonder if the same behavior would come out with him as well. Now, the whole Okobota Town thing being burned to the ground was a plot point that was introduced very briefly right before the start of the raid. right before the start of the Odin flashback. So what happened was that Hold'em showed up complaining about some thieves stealing food from their farm. And so Otsuru knew that the people responsible for stealing the food were the members of the Alliance, because since the Alliance had grown in numbers, people need to eat, and so they were stealing the food. Now initially Otsuru was going to take the blame for it, but then the other villagers started standing up and saying like, no, it was us, we actually stole the food. So Hold'em got angry about it and he burned the entire town to the ground, and we are currently led to believe that Otsuru is actually dead, but of course we know better, we know she's alive, probably most of the villagers survived as well. I'm assuming the reason has something to do with Hiyori, but yeah, we'll find out eventually. It was just kind of a plot point that was introduced very briefly so that it could pay off eventually in this chapter here with Big Mom. Also, Big Mom does this thing where she takes phrases from other characters. Like for example, in Whole Cake Island, Brook tells her, "What kind of a fool would consider his own death as part of a plan, young lady?" And then when Kaido meets Big Mom, he tells her, "I told you if you came here I'd kill you, Lin Lin." And then she replies by referencing Brook and saying, well, what kind of a fool would march to their own death as if it were part of a plan like that? And so the last line that she has in this chapter is also a reference to what Jinbei said back in chapter 991, where he tells Luffy, Luffy, stay away from Drake, because even in the pirate world, there is a code of honor. And we know that Jinbei worked under Big Mom for a while, so maybe she heard him say it, and that's why she's repeating it here. Or maybe it's the other way around, and she taught him that, and that's why he said it back then.
I really like the fact that this chapter also confirms something that we were speculating from the previous one, which is that Big Mom should also be able to use advanced Conqueror's Haki on her punches, which is exactly what she uses on page 1 by the end of the chapter. And so the logic behind that was, if Kaido can infuse his attacks with Conqueror's Haki, and Big Mom can keep up with Kaido, then by definition, Big Mom should also be able to do that as well. I also think that Kid is also going to be able to do that very, very soon. Not just because he's Luffy's rival, but if he's going to take on Big Mom, if he's going to fight her and actually deal some damage to her, then infusing his attacks with King's Haki is literally one of his best options. Not only that, but the way that the anime shows Kid using his powers to break out of Udon already looks very similar to what infusing an attack with King's Haki looks like.
I actually read some pretty cool speculation that people were having about the possibility of Ulti and Page 1 joining Kid after the end of Wano, becoming members of his crew. And I think that really fits, not just because of their rugged personality, I think they would fit right in, but also Kid's ship has a very strong prehistoric vibe. So it would be kind of cool to see both Ulti and Page 1 aboard the Victoria Punk. Or at the very least, I can definitely see Kid and Ulti attacking Big Mom simultaneously in the beginning of next chapter.
Now, at first, I was going to say that I think Page 1 is actually getting up from that attack. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, oh no. Like, at first, I thought, like, maybe if he has Awakening, he'll be able to get up. But then I thought about it a little bit more from like a writing's perspective. And if Page 1 actually gets back up from this attack, we're going to run into some problems. Like, we could actually have some consistency issues if he gets back up. And here's why. Out of the entire Tobiroppo prehistoric Devil Fruit lineup, I think it's kind of like well accepted that Page 1 is near the bottom of the ladder, if not the actual bottom of that ladder. Okay, so he's one of the weaker ones, if not the weakest one. There's even the scene in the anime where Sanji runs into X Drake after having fought Page 1, and Sanji says, I guess I'm only popular with dinosaurs, and then X Drake says, don't make the mistake of thinking that I'm as weak as Page 1. So Page 1 is at the bottom there. So with that reasoning, if he actually gets back up from this advanced Conqueror's Haki Big Mom punch, then I don't know how the other fights with the Tobiroppo are going to make any sense if the Straw Hats actually defeat them. Because if Page 1 gets back up from this and he's the weakest one, then what does it mean for the rest of them? Nobody who's fighting one of the Tobiroppo inside of the dome is capable of doing what Big Mom just did to Page 1. Okay? So if Page 1 gets back up from this attack, then that would mean that everybody who's fighting a Tobiroppo should be able to deal the amount of damage that Big Mom dealt to Page 1, and then some. Robin, Brook, and Frankie don't even have basic Haki that we know of. So if Page 1 gets back up from this advanced Conqueror's Haki attack, and he's the weakest one, I don't see how the Straw Hats winning over the other Tobiroppo is going to make any sense. Page 1 needs to stay down after this for the other fights to work. Either that or Oda's going to have to try and find a very convincing and creative way for the Straw Hats to deal enough damage to the Tobiroppo to be able to defeat them. So hopefully Big Mom's punch got the KO, and hopefully the punch was overkill. Oh, and one last thing before I go. The anime yesterday actually confirmed that Odin does in fact use Conqueror's Haki on his blades, on his attacks. Similar to the way Kaido does it, the way Luffy now does it, and Big Mom does it, Odin can do the exact same thing. I said it in the previous review, but I'm pretty sure that Roger was the one who taught him how to do that. We see his eyes light up in the anime, and he charges up his swords. So yeah, it's pretty much confirmed that Odin is capable of infusing his swords with Conqueror's Haki as well. That's gonna do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all the support in all the other videos. I really appreciate that. Overall, I thought the chapter was okay. It was fine. It's interesting because now we're in a position where Usopp's fight, Sanji's fight, possibly Law's, Zoro, and Chopper's fight are yet to be determined. So I'm really hoping for their matchups to be confirmed. And then I also think we need to see Jinbei at some point because it's been a while since Oda has decided to focus on him. Sorry, just one last thing, I promise. I just got done reading the official Spanish translation for the chapter, and the part of Kaido's dialogue to Luffy reads a little bit differently, but it kind of gives it a cool meaning that is also very relevant to the story. So I'm just going to read it to you. I'm going to translate it to you. Kaido says, "Wororororo." Looks like you're enjoying yourself, so that part stays the same. But then he also says, "It looks like even when you're in trouble, you can still smile." So it seems like Kaido is making a reference, sort of nudging Luffy about the will of D, right? That's a clear reference to Jawar D. Saul teaching Robin to laugh even in really sad situations. It's also a reference to Roger and how he laughed even though like he was sick and he was gonna die. It's a reference to Ace dying with a smile on his face. So there's a little bit of like Kaido saying like, I noticed like the will of D is with you here. And Kaido should know how to recognize that trait from the will of D because Rox D. Sebek was his former captain. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks again. Take care. Catch you later. Bye.